I'm going to do something a little different in this video, and is basically spoil it up front. And the spoiler is, there isn't a big story related to comics here. Is this the end of DC Comics as we know it? No. Is there massive layoffs that are going to topple the comic business forever? No, there's not that either. Now, I know some news outlets are pushing that, and I think some channels are, this is the end for DC, because you got to do one of those videos at least, I don't know, every 2 months or so. It's kind of the requirement. I think YouTube has it in their terms of service. I expect to be taken down any minute. But there's not much to this story. Now, that doesn't mean the comic industry is perfect. That doesn't mean there's nothing to worry about. There's plenty to worry about. But this ain't it, Chief. So, if you want to stick around after the skip, I'm going to go into the details. Otherwise, there you have it. Hey everybody, this is Perch. There's a story up on Bleeding Cool, because that's where all the best news originates. And it basically goes over, our big layoffs coming to DC, what does this mean for comics? And it's written in such a way to, I don't want to say incite panic, but the headline is DC Comics staff told about layoffs today. DC Universe first. So there's a couple misleading things about this headline. First off, an email went out to everyone within Warner Media, which is a lot more than DC Comics staff. If you read this, you might think DC Comics staff is getting laid off, or the layoffs are targeted them. You go a little bit deeper into the article, and especially with the update, and things do become clear. There's now a bunch of stories on Variety, other places, around what these layoffs exactly are, and you quickly come to discover, if you quickly scan them, that very little of it has to do with comics. And we knew this was coming. And how do we know this was coming? Well, because Warner Media and AT&T said this was coming. This was part of when the acquisition happened, that after roughly 12 to 18 months, as they told investors, they would look for synergies. They would look, which is, a fancy word for overlapping jobs where we get rid of some. In addition to that, we had the pandemic hit, and that is hitting a bunch of jobs of workers who were, in their media and operations department. And now that they're looking at a full suite of these different companies, remember, Warner Media has a lot of different entities underneath it. As we learned earlier today, Rooster Teeth and DC, both owned by Warner Media, doing things together with this insane Wonder Woman cover. That will give me a downvote right there. Anyway, insane if you think it's insane. Not insane if you don't think it's not insane. How's that? Anyway, you're going to see more and more of this. You're going to see Warner really push consolidation of their brands. And of course they're going to. That's what an acquisition is all about. When you have independent companies running around, they do their own thing. When they get acquired, they consolidate. This isn't like the newest news in the world. But when this acquisition happened, investors were told they would look for redundancies, because that's what happens with every single acquisition under the sun. Groups come together, in theory everybody's happy, there's usually some payout of some stock, some people get a short-term bonus, and then those that want to stay start trying to protect their jobs, and those that are happy to take the exit money out are hoping for a big severance. Well, a bunch of people are getting a big severance. Now, I want to make it clear here, layoffs and that kind of stuff, not fun, tend to definitely impact most negatively the lower levels, the people who are making the least amount of money. And this sucks. For a bunch of people, they've lost their job. It sucks. I also want to make it clear, this doesn't mean DC Comics will have no removal of staff. Undoubtedly, they will. DC Comics a couple years ago had Vertigo, had a bunch of things going on with it, and they've consolidated that line. Do you remember when they had, Jinx World and Young Animal and Black Label and Vertigo and feels like 5 or 6 other things, Wonder Comics, and they said, we're going to consolidate this together because we want a more straightforward line. Well, this was DC Comics being a little either forward-thinking or just not stupid and realizing what was going to come with Warner Media and AT&T and everything else. They consolidated their brands, making a more streamlined operation. When you say make a more streamlined operation, that makes managers and other people, investors, very excited, happy, bouncing up and down their seat. It makes the workers kind of nervous because it means some of those people are going to go away, and they will. Now, this doesn't mean DC Comics is in dire trouble. In fact, again, everything we can see with our own eyes, the filings, the sales, the moves they're making, the attempts to stabilize their own distribution, these are not a desperate company trying to shed business, nor, as some people have claimed, they claim they have the inside track. They don't. This is not the company who is, basically on their last legs trying desperately to make some noise and get some attention. That's not what they're doing either. This is simply a company trying to make business moves to survive long term, particularly in light of their new corporate boss that wants them to work together with other entities as much as possible. DC Comics does not want to have to go to Warner Media or Rooster Teeth or wherever the entity is. And the way these things typically work is that Warner Media or AT&T will come and say, "Hey, you've got Superman and Batman. We have this thing over here. We'd like to get some attention. You're going to share the brand over there, and this company's do some promotion over here, and hopefully everybody wins a little bit." And then they try and figure something out. And typically in times of acquisitions, a lot of the managers and executives start trying to do this on their own because they want to prove their value to the corporation. So that's a lot of what's going on. It's going to continue to go on. And some of it may be good, and most of it will probably be stupid, because these attempts usually are. Now, if you look through the article, the thing you mentioned, and I'm not talking about Bleeding Cool now, I'm talking about, an actual newspaper, news source, and in this case, Variety, talks about the people who are being let go and the people who are accepting severance. In many cases, some very high-profile executives are being moved out as groups consolidate. And you also see a lot of the media efforts, in this case, the streaming efforts, trying to consolidate around HBO Max and their streaming bet. Warner Media is doing what NBC Universal Comcast is doing, because they're also laying off, what Netflix will probably do at some near point, what Apple TV, Amazon Prime, and pretty much everyone else is doing, including Disney Plus. They're trying to put their dollars into the new streaming bet. This was seen as the future anyway, and with a pandemic and everybody staying at home, it's like somebody stepped on the gas with streaming services. There's been a lot of videos talking about Disney is losing money and chaos and everything is dying over there too. Well, based on the numbers, yeah, Disney Plus is doing well. And again, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why. It's not part of some evil woke agenda or some anti-SJW plot. It's simply that people have to stay at home. And when they're staying at home more, they watch TV. And in many cases, with no new TV being produced or limited TV, the networks are hurting a little bit, so they're having to go to their back catalog. How they take that back catalog and deliver it to consumers? Through a streaming service. That's what's going on. And so that's where a lot of these companies are placing their bets, including Warner Media. Now, DC Universe absolutely may be impacted. That is true what Bleeding Cool said there. In fact, it undoubtedly will be, because having a standalone group of people producing content when you've got 5 other groups also doing the same thing within Warner Media makes no freaking sense. So, of course, there's going to be some consolidation and there's going to be some jobs lost in that process. There's also going to be people who are tied to producing media in, quote unquote, the old way that are going to go away in favor of people who can produce media in the new way. Now, this also sucks. People are going to lose their jobs. It's unpleasant. I'm not making light of that, nor am I dismissing it. I'm just saying that people losing their jobs does not equate to the comic industry as a trash fire. Did you see that they did that Wonder Woman cover? A bunch of people on Twitter complained yesterday, and this is AT&T reacting by shuttering DC Comics, which is what a couple people have said. Now, beyond the absolute absurdity of that statement, that any giant corporation would listen to a handful of people on Twitter bitch about a cover and within 24 hours later start firing people in the comics division, wonderful as a fantasy that might be, it's just not reality. So what is going to go on with DC? Because undoubtedly somebody is going to post a comment, I can guarantee it, stating, "Oh, okay, so nothing is wrong with comics, huh? Oh, okay, so everything is perfect. Just stick your head in the sand, Perch. That's what you're saying. Just stick your head in the sand and don't worry about any of the problems." No, of course not. That's an idiotic thing to say too. And by the way, if somebody does come in and write that in the comments, and most of those people do not listen very far. They take my advice, they jump off at the skip, they flame, and they don't listen to this point, and then they look like dumbasses. Feel free in the comments to let those people have it. And if you disagree with me, of course, let me have it too. That's fine. But no, the comic industry is not in great shape. Nothing really is, but there's lots of problems with the comic industry, like we've talked about at length. In fact, I get plenty of comments saying I'm too negative for talking about the problems in the industry. There are plenty of them. Price point is too high. The monthly market is troubled. The comic shop themselves is on the ropes, just being retail and a number of other things. The distribution is still a mess. Even if they have moved away from Diamond, it's still a mess. And, the creators aren't paid enough and in many cases are putting out work that feels uninspired, to say the least. All those things are true. This mass layoff is not it. And in general, you got to be wary of these sites. Why is Bleeding Cool putting up a, in theory, honest headline, but not really? It's misleading. It's like if it was on Snopes, it would say true but misleading. Yeah, DC Comics staffers got an email, but so did everyone else. By wording it that way, it definitely shades the story a certain direction. Why do they do that? Well, because they're popular. They're hits. Even this video, even though I tried at the very beginning, I'll even put in the description, hey, there's nothing to see here if you don't want to watch it. It will get more hits than, say, me talking about a wonderful comic from the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, or anything else. I could do a video retrospective about Denny O'Neil and all the contributions he made to comics. It would not get as many hits and as many likes and so on as this video. That's a shame. But that is the world we live in. So why do people write misleading headlines? Because there's money in it. Do they know they're writing misleading headlines? Yeah, abso-freaking-lutely they do. Absolutely. Everybody knows what they're doing here. Just most people aren't honest enough to say it. Anyway, that's what's going on. That's the story about these layoffs, everything around them, and what to expect next. So what can you do? Buy the comics you like. That's what you can do. Pretty much the end. Feel good about where you're spending your money. I do hope these people, the people who do get laid off, they land on their feet. They can find other employment. We need certainly stability and jobs for everyone. That is a good thing. And I feel bad for you if you were impacted by this. I'm sorry. If there's anything I can do for you, absolutely reach out. If you have any questions, leave a comment below. Like, subscribe, notification bell. I'm sure there's some other gimmick YouTube wants you to do. Follow me on social media. Send me an email at comicsperch@gmail.com. And thanks for listening.